Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Men and Sex. I'm your host, Mr. Wood. This podcast is all about normalizing taboo conversations. Here we talk about sexuality, intimacy, masturbation, all the things that as men we were told not to talk about. I like to do a few different styles of podcast here. I have different teachers come on. Sometimes I interview people anonymously. And today I'm really excited because this is someone that I met out in the wild. I actually met them at my first Tantra retreat. Went down to Texas and had an amazing time. And this conversation that we're having today is something that was just like percolating in my own experience. So I'm excited for this episode to be a lot from my own experience and interacting with this person. Today on the show, we have Mara from Pleasure Creatress. Sometimes she steps in as a dom at events. And as I said, I met them at a Tantra retreat. Mara, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ian. Looking forward.
I heard that little giggle in there.
Though I'm sure there'll be lots of giggles today.
Mm. So I would love to just share with the audience a little about my experience going to the event, and that will lead us into kind of this deeper conversation, how we met and all that. Um, This was an event that I actually randomly saw on Instagram from someone that I was following. I had just seen some of their content. His name is Justin, and he posted on his story that there was one or two spaces available for a man to come to that has some experience. And I'm the type of person that I love to kind of skip levels. And so this story was a perfect opportunity for me. It was like, oh yeah, I want to go to level two and skip over level one. And so I sent Justin a message and went down to this experience Tantra event that was really focused on shadow work and deep emotional processing. And this is where I ran into Mara. Mara, what was it that drew you to this event?
Well, we were both actually first
Oh,
timers
that's
skipping level
right.
one.
That's right.
Yeah, I had met Justin at a festival that happened in Mexico called Hedone, which is also all about art and eroticism. And he had invited me to the retreat in Texas, and so glad I went. I think I'd been part of this world of kink and poly for I think like 8 or 9 years now. And just in the past 2 years had started hearing everyone that I really admire talk about how integral Tantra was to their journey and their sexuality. I was like, I gotta figure out what this Tantra stuff is. So that retreat was a really impactful experience.
Mm. And for the listeners, if you want to go like a deep dive portal into more of the understandings of Tantra, I interviewed both Justin and Leola on the podcast. Those are other episodes. And she gives a really beautiful explanation of Tantra in that episode. So if you want to dive down that rabbit hole, you can go back and listen to that one. Um, yeah, for me, this was the first event where I was. mm, gonna be in an experience where sexuality was open and welcomed. And the path that I had been on and doing this work with men, it was just the perfect timing for me to jump all in myself and have an experience like this. And I didn't know really what I was getting into. It was one of those events where I don't even really read into what's going to happen. I just trust in the process, and it led into this whole experience that's leading to this podcast today. One of the most important things to for this conversation is that at this event, every night ended in what's called a temple night. And I'm going to share a little bit about that, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, Mara. So for me, I had never been to a temple night. I had been trying to seek them out around me and find them because I wanted to go have one of these experiences. But to me, the experience is a more sacred, ceremonial, ritualistic um, experience where a group of people come together and there's an opportunity to explore touch, intimacy, all the way into sexuality. And my perception of it early on was just that, okay, yeah, I want to go into these spaces. It's more sacred, it's more intentional. There's often sobriety and connection to it. And it's just like inviting in curiosity and people to explore without shame. And yeah, there's an openness to it. So this is how, at this experience that we went to, every night ended in a temple night where there was different parameters, different rules and different sections within the space. Like over here is for people that just want to cuddle or, talk. Over here is for people that want to explore sensual play. Over here is more BDSM, shibari, tying, and impact play. And over here is like group play where people can explore sexuality together. So just laying a little bit of a roadmap here for you, the listeners, because this temple night is going to be a huge part of this subject because it's what rippled out for me. Anything that you want to add to that, Mara?
Yeah, I think those were definitely highlights of the Tantra retreat. But so much of the retreat itself, I would say, was more focused on personal development. And then it had a sprinkle of sexuality, right? And the more intense temple night in the evenings, versus I think what some people picture, which is like it's all focused on sexuality the whole time.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise to me. And the temple nights were really beautiful. And I think we both came solo, which is also very different than coming as a
Hmm.
couple and with a partner. And so you very slowly, throughout the 5 days we were there, as you start to connect with people, see who you're drawn to, it gets more and more intense and you feel more comfortable interacting in various ways. Well, by the fifth night, everyone's best of friends.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that in. It is an important part of that retreat and this experience for me was that it was very, very deep personal development stuff throughout the days. I had different experiences that I felt so expanded, and a lot of this conversation that we'll have today is rippled out of me being attuned to things that were bubbling up inside of me, different belief systems, different things I was feeling in my body, and there was a lot of deep interpersonal work, looking at ourselves, interacting with one another, our projections, on women, our projections on men. There was some very deep exploration going on there.
Absolutely.
And then for you, is there anything you want to add to the for the listeners and just describing it, what the Temple Night experience is like?
Yeah, so part of my experience, I've been to many, many temple nights, and I think my exploration of this world was I had first found public play parties in Washington, D.C., and later in San Francisco, and then kind of internationally around the world. And those are very different from a private gathering.
Mm,
And then a good friend of mine introduced me to these more, like, as you mentioned, conscious, ritualistic, ceremonial temple nights. And I was like, wow, this is where the work is being done. This is where people are showing up as the best versions of themselves. And I actually hosted my very first temple night in Mexico City earlier this year. And that was the culmination of really fully experiencing so many different ones around the world and wanting to bring that here to a culture that's very conservative,
mm,
very Catholic,
mm,
but there are a lot of kind of new events happening around being more open in our sexuality, and I want to be part of that here in Mexico City.
beautiful. Yeah, there is I think what's what's beautiful about the organization of a temple night is that there is some structure to lean into. There's some parameters, there's some rules that allow us to be, for one, people to feel safe and held in that process, and there to be kind of some understanding of how things work. So, yeah, these temple nights at the community, as Mara shared, I came to this event by myself. I knew nobody, and had just known Justin a little bit online. To come into that experience was, uh, yeah, I think expansive once again is the word to just show up and be like, all right, now we're in an open space where I can ask for my desires. And
Exactly.
I think that that's one of the things I'm really learning about men right now is men are really good at fantasy, and they've been grown, so many have been grown and shaped with the porn mind that's like, oh yeah, I want an orgy, I want this, I want that. But if you actually put a lot of these men in a room and said, all right, now go and stand in front of the person that you desire something with and tell them what you desire, they would probably freeze.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what you've noticed in men in that way.
I think it was really sweet and beautiful to see because it was a level two and there was people who are more experienced in the space walk up to me and very clearly state like, I'm interested in receiving like a prostate massage from you. I was like, whoa, that is so clear and helpful and thank you for articulating your desires and your boundaries. I think when you don't have experience doing either of those two things, a lot of time when I play with new people, I ask, what are your boundaries? And they're like, oh, I don't have any.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, sweet soul, like, let me take you through a list of things that are probably your boundaries that I have discovered over the years that I have to tell people
Mm,
that I don't enjoy. But some of that only comes through experience, right?
right,
And a lot of people are open and come in and say, well, I'm down to try anything once. And
right.
that can be fun too.
Mm. And yeah, in my own exploration and what I see with a lot of men that I work with is it is those reps. And I think for a lot of men, our foundation with sexuality is hiding, is being sneaky, is not talking about it a lot, is not getting support in navigating rejection.
Mhm.
And so with like each rejection, it actually like closes the throat in the voice a little bit more because we're not understanding how to work through rejection. And so a lot of men are getting quieter and quieter, or they become very pouty or like have temper tantrums when when they have desires and want them. It's kind of more of a collapse than an expansion. And that's been a huge exploration for myself is really empowering my voice again and altering my perception of hearing a no and hearing a not interested. Like that's been a huge evolution for me in the realm of sexuality, sensuality, but simultaneously it impacts how I can show up as a man in business, in other relationship, in friendship, and the things that I'm creating. So, yeah, that could be a whole subject for a podcast, just talking about the exploration of the temple night and stepping into exploring our desires as men.
Absolutely. We always say no is just a redirection. There might be something beneath that no that somebody might share, but let's say you want to have full penetrative sex with somebody and they're open to a more sensual connection, and that might be lovely as well. Or it redirects you to a different play partner and you end up having a wonderful night.
Hmm.
I have so much respect and gentleness for men in their bravery in asking someone out on a date or anything like that. Especially when I started dating women, and I was like, oh, initiation is really hard,
Mm.
and the rejection is really hard, and men dealing with it on a day-to-day basis is very brave.
It's one of those things that once again, there aren't enough discussions like this because I think on a deep subconscious level, when it comes to love or intimacy, sensuality, there's something about that rejection that it is just so easily interwoven with shame of there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, I'm bad, I'm broken. It's like so tapped into that for men. And I think some men have the gift of confidence and they've, maybe navigated through that, but I think that's a huge thing we're seeing in the world today is just that deep pain from rejection because it relates to my identity or who I am as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've witnessed, especially in like early 20s, a lot of my female friends, how they reject men,
Yeah.
which can be very uppity and very cruel. And I
Mm,
had to kind of intervene and be like, you can't do that. That's a human being. It doesn't matter if you're not interested. There's ways to basically have a rejection, but with grace and with kindness.
mm, mm. Beautiful. All right. Well, he, we'll switch gears and I'll share some of my story with the audience of really what percolated my desire for this conversation. As we were in these temple night experiences, there was something in me that I saw, that I noticed, that is also a theme that I see out in the world, that people are trying to point to research and studies, and it's interesting to see what men do to kind of support this shadow that I saw in myself. So, of course, well, one of the first things we did as we moved into Temple Nights, it actually was just so edgy for me and just blew me open from the very beginning, was we stood in a circle and then we had to basically show the person in the room that we thought was the most attractive. We basically just outed ourselves from the very beginning of like who we thought was the most attractive in the room. And that's how things started. But as the event went on, the thing that I saw percolating in myself is I started seeing different women that I was attracted to and wanted to connect with. I had desires, but the pattern I saw showing up in myself was that if I saw that woman interacting with another man, that it brought something up in me. It
Mm.
brought a resistance. It brought like there was some shadow there. There was some projection there around purity. And that's what I really wanted to dive into in this conversation is these beliefs and this pedestalization of purity. And so each night it would be like, okay, maybe on day one it was like, oh yeah, I'm really attracted to these people. We would have our different experiences in the day. Maybe that attraction would grow. And then maybe on the first night or the second night, I would see them be with a different man. And it would like do something to me. It was like it would close something off in me where I was like, oh, okay, now I can't be with that person because they've already been with someone else. And so I was noticing this and just being like curious, like, wow, that's really interesting. I'm coming to this event knowing that the intention is for us to explore and be with different people. This is in no way a monogamous experience. But just noticing, like, on a deep subconscious level, that there was feelings that arose once I saw someone that I had desires for be with someone else. So that's where I'd love to just start this conversation around purity and what is this that we as men are facing, and what is it that women are facing on the other side of this purity conversation?
Yeah, I think ultimately purity culture is one of the strongest tools of the patriarchy, where Men are taught that they can gain ownership and control over a woman's body through this, and they are also shamed for their own desires. I grew up religious in the church, and I have a very clear memory as a teenager being in a sermon and the pastor talking to a room full of about 100 teenagers and describing all of us as cakes. And we are delicious
Whoa.
cakes with frosting. And every time we allow somebody to have any
Whoa.
sort of erotic, sensual, sexual experience with us, it is somebody licking off some of our frosting. And by the
No.
time we find our partner or our husband, then we are a cake without frosting. And who wants a cake without frosting? And I mean, I was an impressionable teenager, and that really stuck with me. And I really subscribed to the abstinence culture. And it was up until college when I finally started having these experiences, and I had a lot of anger because I was like, why did they keep this from me? This is so beautiful, so expansive. I don't know why anybody would encourage people not to pursue their desires with people that they love in these beautiful ways.
Wow. What a potent story. You have no frosting left. Mm. And what I hear in so many of these stories, in these belief systems that I've been navigating and discovering in myself and seeing out in the world, something like abstinence is so often led with fear and shame instead of speaking to it from a positive way, like, this is why it's beautiful, this is why it's amazing. It's always bled with fear and shame. Because if you do this, if you don't do it this way, this is how bad it will be. And, I find it so fascinating because, particularly when it comes to sexuality, the fearing and the shaming seems to just magnetize the desire for something or amplify it. When a person is raised on fear and shame and then they go have an experience, it just amplifies like how powerful it is. And so it seems it's like as I get older, it's actually very counterintuitive if the religions actually want that for people, which I don't think they do, and that's a whole conversation in itself. But it's like using the fear and shame actually amplifies it and makes more of a quote unquote problem of it, from my experience.
Absolutely. I was just talking to my mom earlier, and she was talking about a son of a friend of hers that got really involved in the church. And he asked a girl to marry him very young and very early. And they think it's because the church has told him that he basically cannot have sex with this woman until they get married. So he's like, let's get married as soon as possible. And I had a running joke with a past lover of mine that had grown up in Iran, where they have the culture of the temporary marriages,
Mm,
where every time we would, have a date, a play date, we would say, like, how do you feel about getting temporarily married today? And for us, it was a
whoa.
lighthearted joke, but obviously that is a very real part of the culture right now.
Wow. Yeah, so, you know, for me, it was interesting because I was having to face this in real time at this event in these temple nights. And it felt like I was bumping up against, it was almost like a wall. It was bumping up against something in myself, which was a split of I desire to share this experience with this woman, but oh, I just saw her being with that other man the other night, and it felt frustrating. It felt frustrating for me because it was like I almost couldn't control it. I both had the desire, but then there was this part of me that kind of shut down in response to that. And it was something that I feel like I was navigating this whole experience was, as each night went on, there was just more things in my mind or more data that I had taken in of, oh, this person had been with this person. Oh, this person had been with this person. And yeah, it's I can see it connected to so many things. There's so many stories about the virgin, about the virgin. You're either the virgin or you're the whore. Like that
Mhm.
it's like the total polarity. You're either a virgin or you just swing pendulum all the way to the other side. And it's fascinating to me the obsession with this. And as I've said, on social media, it's one of those things that I see today where people are doing their best to now bring in science. And they're like, oh, every time a woman sleeps with a man, then the DNA is in there forever. And then you're going to have, if you have a child, they're going to have looks from like, people are going to extreme measures to support this purity perspective and broadcast it out to the world.
Yeah, I obviously don't agree with that. I think each of these experiences is so beautiful and unique in their own ways. Um, I think that happens to women too. We want to connect with somebody, and it's not like the world lays down at our feet and we're able to connect with everyone that we want, especially in those temple spaces.
Mm,
I think what reactions I usually see from men is either they turn into competition mode. They're like,
yeah,
oh, I see she's interested in
yeah.
different people, and I'm going to be the one to win her. And I'm going to take
Mm,
up all her time and attention so she can't be with anybody else.
yes.
Or they have this kind of revulsion, which is like, oh, I saw her do this with somebody and they're not even
Mm,
handsome or they're not even
yeah.
worthy of her attention. And if she would go for somebody like that, then I don't want to be with her because she doesn't deserve me. So we create different stories in our
Mm.
head. I'm curious what it triggered for you.
Yeah, there were aspects, there was like a few things you said that were sprinkled in there. Um, there was definitely moments where I was like, oh, she was with him, then that means it doesn't mean as much for me to be with
Mm,
her. And so I love that you just brought that thread in because that was tapping into an aspect of um that whole like the quest and the quest meaning more if it's like the quest means more when she rejects more men and chooses me, then the quest means more. But because uh I see her being with other people and I judge them as in some way, so I got to see many layers of judgment in that. And so therefore the quest doesn't mean as much because if I get that thing, uh the meaning is now less than I perceived it to be originally. It's so fascinating.
yeah, and it's beautiful to unpack that and recognize that and figure out what that means, for you personally and part of your journey.
I think that, I think a big piece in just, in talking about it right now and having it being stirred is there's this deep piece around not seeing myself, not, it's like another layer of confidence that I need to see a woman that I judge in some way to some standard of beauty, of like being desired based upon my own judgments and the world around me. And that if I'm with her and she's with me, then that means something about me. And then
Mm.
that soothes for me where I feel insecure or not good enough or where some part of me is stuck in mm, yeah, that maturing process out of young-minded perspectives where so much of life is based upon the love that I'm getting is if I'm deemed a good boy or not, or I'm deemed lovable or not. It's like from that, I see it very much from that child perspective, that hasn't gotten attention. So I can see that here is like, oh, it means less, and therefore it's not going to soothe me in the same way.
Yeah, it's interesting because we go full circle, right? If we're actually with a partner who is a virgin, that's not something I seek out personally now.
Right.
I value a partner with experience, and obviously that experience comes from previous partners. But as a woman, if I do see a man that is very sexually promiscuous and has a reputation as maybe a little bit of a playboy, that can also be a bit of a turnoff. So it's all about the balance. And obviously, we all want to feel loved and worthy. And I think hearing the complexity and fullness of someone's lived experience is actually beautiful, and allows us to be a better partner to them, if they're able to be vulnerable about, past wounds, past sexual experiences, and that we're all part of each other's healing process in partnership.
Mm, mm. What has it been like? You talked about your religious upbringing, you talk about the world that you explore today. Do you still bump up against the purity stuff at all in yourself? And what do you hear the women around you speak to when it comes to because I imagine, you know, us as men, we're holding it in a certain way, we're projecting it in a certain way, we're feeling it a certain way towards ourselves. But I'm curious, like, what the weight of that for women. And I see it, I make up a story of how it shows up in different ways for women, but the weight of the purity projection on women out there. And I know that uh, well, I don't say I know. I see a lot in women, which is a disconnection from pleasure. They don't enjoy sex as much. Maybe they've just learned to get a vibrator and put it on their clit for 10 minutes and get an orgasm out real quick, but they don't really enjoy sex that much with their partner. Like there's so many ways that I make up in my mind has been an impact of how it ripples into women.
Yeah, I think dismantling shame will be a lifelong journey for me. Even now that I consider myself more advanced in this world, and now I'm teaching other people and facilitating events. The only reason I'm able to do that well is because I went through all of these
Mm,
hard feelings and I had to process them,
mm,
myself, and am therefore better equipped to help others process that. I think for me, a lot of it has also been finding my voice, and calling out men that I love, that I've dated, that are my friends, and holding them accountable, for how they show up in these spaces, comments that they might make about women's purity, women's bodies, women's sexuality, and doing it in a loving way and actually asking them, like, where does this come from for you? And ultimately, usually it leads back to some inner belief that they hold about themselves. If their woman is acting in a certain
yeah.
way, what does that
Ooh.
mean and how does that make them feel and where's that coming from?
Ooh.
So I think just having these conversations can be eye-opening, and men who are willing to do the work and investigate their inner worlds and think about where their beliefs come from, whether it's cultural, whether it's from their family, their religion, their work. We're very lucky if we're in a more open and sex positive environment that a lot of men have done the work, but a lot is left to be done.
Mm. I This one's deep, which is like if my woman is acting a certain way, I can feel such a deep pocket there, which is it's this. I feel like it's a trap. There's like a stuckness to I want so I'm raised in this world. It teaches me purity. I want a female partner that's really good in bed, that's really connected to her pleasure, but but it's confined to just being for me. And so for each man, there's a perceived limit of how wild in her expression she can be. Like, don't go too far to liberation. Don't go too far into big expression because then I don't know if that can be controlled. And so yeah, I can feel the kind of knot that's tied there of men really wanting good sex, wanting a good relationship, good sexual relationship with their partner, wanting them to desire it, wanting them to be liberated, but not too liberated. And where is that? Where is that scale? Where does it stop?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, this perception of like the wild, liberated woman that's super sexy, and men are attracted to her and want to experience her.
Hmm.
But once they do often try to control her, possess her, or keep her away from everything that made her that wild, liberated being. And if a woman then acquiesces and becomes kind of a more submissive, monogamous, sweet, whatever it may be, then those same men will step out on that woman and seek again the wild, liberated woman elsewhere. That's a pattern I've definitely seen repeated again and again.
It's like, like it's such an interesting thing to sit with and look at. It feels like a very small success window in this desire that so many men have. And I mean, a lot of men come to me because their sex life is not what they want it to be. And I think it seems that there there's a large number of people that are not having the kind of sex that they would desire to. And we hear these classic stories of, oh, the honeymoon phase is over, and then you don't have a good sex life anymore. You have kids, you don't have a good sex life anymore. There's like all these tales of why the sex life goes into not being a good sex life. And yeah, I think that mm, there's I once again, I make up that there's been massive impact. The purity thing has had massive impact on everyone, but when I look through the window of the impact on women, it's huge. And I'm grateful to see a huge, like a reawakening of teachers leading with pleasure and liberation. And I've spent some time in large communities where women are exploring this. And it's actually one of the main things that's led me to work with men is what I've seen women being led through. But I know that there is a large percentage of women that have just been given the purity conversation. They haven't found liberation, and therefore they're not having that beautiful life force energy revitalizing them, and it's not making their way to their partner, and there's a huge ripple effect from it.
Yeah, it's definitely work that needs to be done and continues to be done on both sides. I like to imagine like what a world would be like if all women felt safe, and the amount of openness and creativity and creation and beauty that could be created. And I'm so grateful for the men that create spaces for women to feel safer and explore their sexuality in ways that pushes their edges and leads them to discover new delicious desires. Maybe they find new boundaries, maybe they find new desires. But all of that exploration that we can do together in spaces that are set up in conscious ways is really beautiful.
Mm. What is it like for you having gone through your path that you've been on of, growing up with the religions that, taught you about the importance and the fear of purity, now moving into liberation and teaching these things. And as you said, you're still going through your own layers of it, but much more in the world where there's liberation. Are you, have you had enough time to watch other women be on this journey? And have you had conversations with other women that have been on this journey, moving through that pedestalization of purity into liberation? What's the conversation there, if any?
It's a very common path, like you said. Oftentimes, the extreme denial of our desires leads very often to the opposite. So you find a lot of women in these spaces that came from more conservative and religious backgrounds. But then it goes full circle. Some women have kind of a more open exploration, and then they go back to a more kind of monogamous divine union. Sex brings me closer to
Mm,
God
mm.
perception, and that is so beautiful too. I definitely agree. I think I've had some orgasms that I'm like, this is the closest I've felt to the divine and to God.
Hmm. Mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the path I'm attracted to as well. Is just like, how does sensuality, how does sexuality bring me to that feeling of ultimate union? So I can relate with that. There's so much of what we talked about is my story and my experience with purity, but one of the pieces that I realize I've missed is there's also a lot of men that are facing those belief systems as well, of the
Mhm.
purity and innocence and keeping that to themselves. And this is some of the work I imagine you do, which I would love for you to share a little bit of that with the listeners around, you do some doming at parties and maybe some of the other stuff that you do with men, because I imagine there's also a lot of men that are navigating this same purity conversation differently than me.
Yeah, I think as a pro dom, the most beautiful thing is that I can create a space that is free of judgment for whatever desires men bring to me, whatever they've withheld or been fearful to explore. The things that you type into Pornhub late at
Yes.
night, the search history you don't want anyone to know.
Yes.
It's there's something really healing and beautiful about someone just being like, that sounds cool, let's do it, let's try it. And there's something innocent about that too. All of this is done in a very playful way. There's no, at least for me, there's no like scary dom image. I see all of these as just very creative opportunities where men don't have to feel like they're doing something feminine or they're doing something
Mm,
yay or whatever
mm,
labels the world chooses to put on these various activities that can actually lead to a lot of pleasure.
mm. Yeah, I didn't even think about those two labels. Those are big ones, I'm sure, for a lot of men, which is like, don't want it to feel gay. I don't want it to feel feminine. I need it to be hetero, very hetero and safe. And yet there's a part of me that wants to explore and that juxtaposition.
Yeah, and pro dom work is a way to pay someone for those services where you may never have to see them again. And you either get that out of your system or you discover that it's something you enjoy and then you seek that out in your personal life. I think part of what I do through creating temple spaces and doing various Tantra and BDSM workshops here in Mexico City too is this environment of play in a safer space where you can meet people in real life and practice this, you know, going up to somebody and articulating your desires, practice talking about your
Mm,
boundaries and creating a scene in a controlled environment where you're in public, you're visible. And if you bring your partner, which a lot of people do, seeing them interact with other people in a sensual way
mm,
and seeing what feelings that brings up and doing
Mm.
that in a maybe a container where that can be processed and expansion can happen in a more natural way, I think is really beautiful.
It's really interesting to me because as you were just sharing it, it made my brain go into this pocket of thought, which is the fascination of how much variety a man has access to from the internet of different sexual things that he can watch and
Hmm.
experience. Like his brain can experience it, and there's many parts of our brain that don't know the difference between it actually happening and us watching a screen. And so men have all this access and it's just evolving. Cartoons and I'm sure the AI porn is going to get out of this world wild and crazy. But yet there is such a limited access to actually do it in real life. And so the mind gets so distorted, I think. I think the mind gets so distorted in fantasy because it can just go to the wildest fantasies. It's a whole different thing to bring that actually to life in person and face what arises in every kind of experience that is under the guise of some fantasy. It requires a whole other version of me than just watching it on a screen.
Yeah, that's always a question I ask when people share their fantasies. I'm like, what is behind that and underneath that? Is it the feeling? Is it the visuals? Is it something you actually want to experience? Or is it just a fantasy that you'd like to keep in your head? And it could be something that's verbally explored, but not actually physically. And that's a great way to play with edges.
I love that. I love that simplicity, and I don't know that that's spoken to enough. I know that it's not, I know it's not spoken enough, is for men that are watching porn, is it something I actually want to experience? What do I like about it? Is it the visuals that I like the most? Is it, what I feel in my body that I like the most? Um, yeah, I think that that simple question brings a lot of clarity because I think it just goes assumed that if it's something that I like watching, that means that I want to do it. And I don't know that that would be true in a lot of circumstances, or how often it would be true that what men are watching they actually want to do.
Exactly. I think the psychology underneath each of the kinks is fascinating.
I mean, yeah, it for me and myself, it's just like that curiosity of what drives me to desire something, I feel like is an endless rabbit hole. Hmm. Mara, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and having this conversation with me. It was wonderful to dive in, and it was something that I wanted to talk about with you from that time that we spent together. Um, Is there, I would love to pass it to you for anything that you would just feel called to share with the listeners, share with men. We're having this conversation about desires, about purity. Obviously, there can be a bit of shame interwoven in there. You spend a lot of time with men. What's something that these listeners could benefit from hearing?
I think I just want to put out a little bit of gratitude to every man that has helped me figure out my own desires, my boundaries, that has been part of that journey of exploration, good or bad. Each one has been a lesson that has made me into the person I am today. And a lot of gratitude to men who share their desires with clarity. I always appreciate, as we mentioned earlier, like the man that was like, I would like to receive a prostate massage from you.
Hmm.
Like that, that lights my fire much more than the man that is like, let's go home and watch a movie. Netflix and chill. I'm like, I don't know what that means really. So gratitude to the men that own their desires, that take initiative. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And what's arising for me in sharing with the listeners is to be curious, to be mindful. Where have the purity beliefs made their way into you? And how does that show up for you? Either with a partner that you're with or someone that you want to be with in the future. Where is that rub for you? Do you have connections to religion? Did your parents teach you that? Like, how does the purity concept live in you about the other? And then how might that live in you about yourself? Like the sex you've had or want to have, the porn that you watch, if you watch porn. Like, how does that purity belief show up in your projection on the other? And then how might it live in you that you aren't consciously seeing right now? These are some of the things that by looking at our relationship to sexuality, we have the opportunity to unpack, unwind, and step into a different reality where it's like I can have a relationship with sexuality and exploration, whether it's with my partner or partners, that underneath isn't this sneaky hiding, feeling wrong, bad, shameful, every time I'm doing it. That's the opportunity that we have in exploring these purity beliefs and exploring with sexuality. So that is my encouragement to you is to be curious about it. How might that live in me? Hmm. Mara, thank you so much for coming on. And for the listeners, I'll put a link down in the description of ways that you can stay in contact with Mara, or if you have any questions for them. And great to spend this time with you today.
Thank you so much, Ian. It was great to reconnect.
To all the listeners, thank you so much for listening. Many more episodes to come. And as I said earlier, if you want to dive deeper into Tantra, there's past episodes with both Justin and Leola, and keep up that exploration and curiosity.